The KTR1 is a cool, unique, powerful retro handheld that was made by just one guy. But no big deal, right? I mean, how hard could it be to make a handheld all by yourself? I'm working on one and it's almost ready. See, here it is. It just needs a few finishing touches and it'll be good to go, so stay tuned for that. But since that's not ready, I guess we'll have to check this thing out instead. Hello, hi there, I'm TechDweeb, welcome. Thanks for clicking on the video today. If you could make a handheld, what would it be like? What sort of shape would it be? What system would you put on it? What processor would you shove in it? What flavors of plastic would you offer? Seriously, I want to know. Let me know in the comments below. Your handheld, what would it be like? The KTR1 is sort of our answer to what would happen if one guy had the gumption to actually do this. It started way back in November of 2020 on a Chinese forum. A dweeb who goes by the handle Nilwanzi posted that they were working on a handheld. Just one dweeb with a vision. So keep that in mind here. Whatever we'll say about the KTR1, whatever criticisms that we have, that this thing only exists because one person turned their dream into a reality. And they actually did it. And that's really, really freaking impressive. So congratulations, Nilwanzi, for actually doing the thing that you set out to do. And I, for one, am really into the thing that you made. The KTR1 is an Android-based handheld gaming console primarily focused on retro games. At first glance, you might think, oh, this is just one of those Nintendo Switch Lite style handhelds like the RP3 Plus. But dig a little deeper and you'll see that there's a lot going on here that many other handhelds don't do. It has a 3x2 screen, which is the perfect ratio for a device like this and is absolutely my favorite part of this thing. More on that in a bit. It has inline shoulder and triggers and low profile sticks for that all-important pocket factor. It has a huge battery, and this thing is powered by a really good processor and can run lots of stuff that even the T618 devices can't run. It's not perfect, and we'll get into why in a bit, but it's actually really, really cool, and I like it. And today I'm gonna show you why. This KTR1 was sent to me by GoGameGeek, and there's a link to this on their store in the description below. First up, let's talk about the specs, and there's a bit to talk about here. The version on GoGameGeek that I was sent is the high-end version. That's the only version that they have in stock there. And apparently there are other versions on the official site, but you can't buy them from there right now. So yeah, let's just assume that we're talking about the top-end option because you can actually buy this. This thing uses the Helio G99 chipset, and we get the full 8 gigabytes of LPDDR4X RAM, 256 gigabytes of internal storage, and get this, 7,000 milliamp hour battery with 35 watt fast charging. That's a ton of juice, man. And it has all the other bells and whistles, like Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, and we get a micro SD card slot that also takes a 4G SIM card. So you could use this for like mobile gaming or streaming or subbing to TechDweeb to impress the ladies when you're out for a night on the town. Let's take a look at what we get here, shall we? Yeah, we shall, actually. That's what we do here, after all. The KTR1 isn't very big, as these widescreen Switch-style handhelds go. This is definitely the most pocketable out of all the options in this form factor. See, it just slides right in like a stick of butter that you keep in your pocket. Pocket butter. Mine has a plastic shell and it feels really nice, but apparently you could buy this with a metal shell at one point. Even with the plastic, it's a tad on the heavy side, but that's because we have a big juicy battery in here. So it's not heavy for nothing. And overall, it just has a nice feel in the hands. Moving on to the controls, it's average-ish. The D-pad and the buttons are membrane and they feel fine. The buttons feel a tad on the loose and hollow side, but nothing terrible. I heard some other reviewers complaining about these, but they feel alright to be honest. The D-pad feels good, no false diagonals, good action. We get some small Switch-style sticks, and they aren't the most accurate in the world, but they feel good enough, and only have a tiny little bit of cardinal snapping. They're just fine. They'll do the job for you. We have inline shoulders and triggers, which I know lots of people don't like, but you guys know that I prefer them like this. mostly for the pocket factor. And honestly, I don't mind using them. These are clicky as heck though. So don't play this in bed next to your significant other because they'll kick you out of the bed and you'll have to sleep on the floor with the floor monsters. We also get some extra buttons. Up top is select and start. And then these down here on the left is sort of a menu button. And this one on the right is a home button. Up top, we have power and volume, and underneath we have an SD card slot and a headphone hole and a USB-C hole for charging. No video out from there, unfortunately. And the screen is good. We'll talk about the resolution and quality in a bit, so put a pin in that. But I do want to mention here that the screen has very minor bezels around the edge, so it fills the device nicely. So overall, everything is fine. Nothing is amazing, but there are no big red flags or anything. It's all good so far. The screen is probably the most interesting part of this device for me. It's a 4.5-inch screen with a 3:2 aspect ratio and a resolution of 1620 by 1080. The actual quality of the image is great. It's bright and clear and it's got a very high pixel density, and that's good. But to be honest, it's not way better than any of the other premium devices it's competing with. But what this screen does that almost no other screen does is go for that 3:2 aspect ratio. I love this ratio for retro gaming. So some retro games run at 4:3, right? Like NES, TurboGrafx-16, Sega, Nintendo 64, those are 4:3. But some games run at 16:9, like PSP or GameCube or Dreamcast with widescreen hacks. And most Android games are 16:9. So why not choose a screen ratio that's right in the middle? This way, your 4:3 stuff will only have slight pillar boxing on the sides of the screen, and the 16:9 stuff will only have slight letter boxing on the top and bottom. I really wish more handhelds went for the 3:2 ratio because it works so well across the board. It's the most universal aspect ratio. If I could design my own handheld, it would definitely have that 3:2 ratio, no question. And then there's Game Boy Advance, which is my favorite retro system to emulate, and that was a 3:2 system. So even just as an amazing high-end Game Boy Advance device, this thing is so dang good. The system that we have on here is a very basic build of Android 12. Which is good, actually, because that leaves us free to set this up how we want. I have this set up with RetroArch and a handful of standalone emulators like DuckStation for PS1, Redream for Dreamcast, Drastic for Nintendo DS, Dolphin MMJR for GameCube, and Nether SX2 for PS2. I gotta tell you right now that I didn't mess around with Switch emulation. So if you want to know how Switch runs on here, then check out Retro Game Corp's video. Spoiler alert, it's not good, so don't bother. One unique feature about the system is that we have a special shortcut key. If you hold the left function button and press start, it'll open up this sidebar where we can change stuff. You can toggle the performance mode. You get turbo, smart, and power save. You can also change the resolution here on the fly and a few other random settings. And there's a gamepad settings button which opens up this other area. And you can go in there to switch the button layout and the function key layout. All the emulation testing that I did in this video was using the turbo mode, by the way. And what is it like to game on this thing? This 3:2 screen is really a treat to play retro games on. Obviously, all the old stuff is gonna run great. No one's worried about the performance for this old stuff, I'm sure. But it all fills the screen so well. 4:3 stuff has some pretty minimal black bars on the sides of the screen, and even if you do the dreaded unthinkable thing of stretching your games, they won't have much of a stretch. And honestly, for some games, I don't mind doing this. Game Boy Advance really is where this thing is a freaking rock star. There aren't many 3:2 devices out there, none of them with enough horsepower to play the higher end stuff. And we get a GBA experience on here that is so close to being perfect that yeah, I'm gonna call it perfect. And it is hand down my new favorite GBA device, which is saying a lot because GBA is my all-time favorite retro system to emulate. But of course we can run some higher end stuff. You won't have any issues running the early 3D stuff like PlayStation, Nintendo 64, Dreamcast. Any of those games will run without any performance issues at all. And beyond that, this chip is a bit better than the T618 chip. so it runs stuff a bit better than T618 devices like the RP3 Plus. It's not going to run every GameCube and PS2 game at full speed, but some games that don't run well on the T618 devices do run well on here. I'd say you'd probably get about 10% better performance here, which isn't mind-blowing, but it's a nice little boost that I'm happy to have, and it makes some of those harder to run games playable here. And another benefit to gaming on the KTR1 is the battery life. This has a 7,000 milliamp hour battery, and that is just huge. I'm not used to being able to game this long. As I was testing and recording footage, I kept thinking, oh, I probably need to plug this in, and then I'd look and no, I still had lots of battery left. And the sleep function works great. It barely uses any power when it's idle, and it wakes instantly. If you like gaming a lot, like if you need a device that'll last you all dang day, then this thing is definitely going to have you covered, especially if you turn on battery save mode for the easier to emulate stuff. Oh, and it has 35-watt fast charging, so if you do need to top it up, it'll recharge super quick. The amazing battery and the pocket-friendly form factor kind of point to the real benefit of this thing. This is going to be great for someone looking for a daily driver handheld that they can take around with them, something that slips into their pocket easy, something that lasts all day, with the horsepower to run everything up to and including GameCube and PS2. The only drawback that we haven't really talked about is the price. This higher end model is $250 from Go Game Geek. I mean, that might have been good like a year ago, but with the Odin 2 around the corner, and considering that there are lots of great budget handhelds out there like the famous RP2S, which is my current favorite handheld, and it's only like $130, this is gonna be a tough sell. But there's more to retro handhelds than bang for the buck. I can see this being the handheld for lots of people. It really is a special thing because it does stuff that other handhelds don't, and it's a shame that the developer wasn't able to get it to us at a cheaper price. I love it, but I probably wouldn't recommend buying it unless you're willing to pay the premium to get what this does well: the 3:2 ratio screen, huge battery, and that all-important pocket factor. If you're that person and want to pick one of these up, there's a link to the Go Game Geek listing for this in the description below. And that brings us to the end. I'm honestly very curious to hear what you think of this thing. Do you like it? You think it's overpriced? Thinking of getting one? Let me know in the comments below. And subscribe if you haven't yet, obviously. I've reviewed lots of retro handhelds, so check out some of my other videos after this one. That's it from me. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.